Thank you for joining us today for Session 4 of Radio's Digital Transformation Series, Creating Your Digital Organizational Structure. My name is Christine Petcher, Director of Marketing at Marketron. I'd like to walk through a few housekeeping items before we get started. Please note that all participants are muted. Today's webinar is being recorded and we will share it with all registrants afterwards. We do ask that you submit any questions you'd like to ask our presenters via the chat box. At the end of the presentation, we will have a Q&A session. However, any unanswered questions will be followed through by a team member, so please do not worry if we do not get to your question today. I would like to introduce to you our presenters today. We have Todd Coleman, Senior Vice President of Sales here at Marketron, and Mark Whitell, our Senior Training and Onboarding Associate. Todd and Mark, thank you so much for being with us today. I will hand this over now to Todd to get started.
Hey, Christine, thank you. Mark and I are excited to take you guys through this webinar. So I'm going to start today by talking about best practices. So the best practices within the broadcast industry points to the fact that redefining roles and responsibility within an org chart brings the strongest results when it comes to digital transformation. And there's really 5 key components, which are illustrated here on the screen. The first one is assigning digital responsibilities to roles that are currently within the org chart. And the second one is integrating digital into current positions. Resetting and establishing new sales expectations to include the entire team, all departments included. We then move to hiring digital expertise. So when you're hiring new roles, digital acumen is vital. You've got to hire people that understand the digital roles, understand the digital universe. And then revising the organizational charts. So any new roles or responsibilities are accounted for in that revised org chart. Digital responsibility will need to be assigned to current roles within the organization. While I'm not advocating for anyone on this call to change titles, I would like for you to see how they line up. And if you choose to change titles, great. But you can kind of see in the shaded box, that's a digital responsibility. Perhaps at a digital agency, these would be the titles. And then to the right of that, you can see the current role at a radio station. And then what we've done is to the right of that is put a possible new title. So if you kind of married the digital responsibility to the current role, you'd end up with that possible new title. For instance, a sales manager within a digital agency may be called a general sales manager at a radio station, or a VP of revenue might be a new title. Or if you skip down a few, a digital media strategist at an agency would be a promotions or marketing person at a radio station and might just be called a digital strategist, and so on and so forth. Mark, if you want to take us through integrating digital into current roles.
Sure, because this is what's really important about putting a full service, if you will, media company together that transforms from a broadcast organization. The organizations that have the best chance for success are those that add those digital responsibilities to the key roles in all parts of the company. It's not just about having salespeople learning digital to sell to clients. It's about creating a culture that embraces digital as well as broadcast. And so that means elevating digital knowledge for the entire team. It gets them integrated into key roles that we'll talk about here in a second, and those that Todd began to illustrate. What we want to have happen here is the avoiding of silos. I like to say we want to turn these silos that we have had in our various departments across our stations and our markets into pipelines that create results for both ourselves and our advertisers, obviously. So as we look at some of those roles that Todd mentioned here, we talk about a general sales manager becoming maybe the VP of revenue, or it's still a general sales manager, but at the end of the day, we're now responsible for a growing number of lines on the top line of our revenue generating budgets. And an account executive could be called still an account executive, but we had a situation where a company called them integrated media specialists. It may sound like a little bit of a highfalutin term, but isn't it the truth? We're now talking about people that help their clients integrate all the media available to them into their advertising and marketing plans. And importantly, whatever you have for sales support in your organization at this point, or you call it a sales assistant or a coordinator of some sort, they need to be well educated into digital and becoming a digital coordinator, because having digital support for sales is no less important than a traffic director is for the radio station. Most importantly, management buy-in and establishing both activity KPIs, accountability amongst all the staff and so forth is hugely important. Because if personnel buy in, but they see that management take maybe a do as I say, but not as I do mentality, they will not embrace that change. So what can happen as you onboard and move forward with digital marketing as a sales tool? Well, certainly the first step is to add selling digital for the entire sales team. So the team can be trained as a group, they grow their expertise together, again, with that management expectation that everybody embraces it. Those with higher digital knowledge and relationships can help both to begin to initiate the sales and perhaps help with some of their other team members. Salespeople either quickly adopt or resist these new products. So you're going to see in part 2 there, where roughly 15 to 20% of the people are going to excel at this. They're comfortable with digital. They understand it. They have a savviness that they can help their clients understand. And maybe up to 3/4 of the staff is going to do some digital sales, but maybe not embrace it as completely, and perhaps they don't measure up to the budgetary and activity expectations that you want. And then you're going to have 15% to 1/4 of the group that simply resist this. And that typically comes from those that are maybe very, very long tenured in radio sales. They're very comfortable with that and become uncomfortable with something that is so new and different to them. So we want to work on taking the best from good to great and get what we can with the other team members as we continue to train them for higher expectations in the coming months and years. And then once digital revenue becomes a part of the business, you can define teams around those that perform well with digital marketing and those that perform well with traditional radio or other broadcast assets. Reps are comfortable with radio and need to get that same comfort and understanding with digital marketing in order for your company to be successful. So what do you do about looking for other digital expertise within your organization? It isn't just about the salespeople. I urge you, I know a lot of folks don't use recruiters in some of their hiring. They tend to do things, with their own systems, and that's all well and good. But if you don't have the knowledge or resources to accurately assess digital talent, a recruiter can help vet the experience and skills necessary for these new positions that Todd had laid out. And then we need to define the expectations of the job. Clearly define the roles that you're hiring for. Put that job description together that's really meaningful. And don't confuse digital media specialists with IT. And I've seen this more often than I can count, where literally in the company that I came from before Marketron, folks would come up to the digital marketing specialist and say, my email's not working. Well, you know what? That's not who we're talking about here. We want everybody digitally savvy, but don't confuse digital media specialists with IT. And then managing fit. The leaders and managers in the company need to oversee how new ideas will be brought into the company from these new hires, integrated into what you do on a daily basis, and received in the organization overall. Once again, we want to get rid of those silos that say, oh, well, that's the digital people, they're not my thing. Without oversight, the new employee isn't going to be naturally welcomed into the team. And that's the real reason for avoiding those silos. Hiring in twos is an interesting idea, and if possible, it's optimal to hire those two digital roles at the same time. This helps with the possibility of those new hires being isolated, creates further accountability between them, and it does give you some insulation for the company should one of them ultimately not work out. So, some of the new hires that you might be looking at, as it shows on the screen, the digital strategists, the coordinators, graphics and video folks. So the strategist, in my opinion and in my history, is probably the number one hire I would look at by market or by station, depending on the size of your company. This person helps both on the sales side and potentially on the client side. And what I mean by that is this helps the radio sellers understand and get comfortable with the digital assets that they're selling. They can go on four-legged calls and so forth, and that gives the client the confidence that your company has the expertise in digital marketing and can get past that, why am I buying digital from a radio company issue. And from there, the coordinator can be somebody that provides admin for the campaigns that the sellers sell. They can keep an eye on things, they can optimize campaigns, provide reporting for the clients. In a small organization, that can be a combo job. The strategist and the coordinator could be one person in a smaller organization. And then as you sell more and more digital marketing in the field, you will probably need to look at getting graphics folks and video folks involved. You can increase your margins by having these kind of folks on staff and not necessarily have to go and put an outlay out to get this from outside your organization. And I have heard some clients say, if you can't do the videos for me, then don't propose it in a proposal to me for digital marketing for, say, pre-roll or connected TV or something like that. So know that if you don't have these in-house, you'll want to look at outside providers, perhaps in your market, or from folks like us at Marketron for your display ads and so forth.
Great. So this kind of brings us to the typical starting point of a 4-station cluster. You can kind of see by this org chart, it probably looks familiar to a lot of people on this call. You've kind of got your finance, HR, operations kind of siloed, your programming department somewhat integrated. They're doing some social, they're doing some things with the website. They're a little more integrated than other departments. Marketing promotions, again, very traditional. And then under sales, you can see that the digital coordinator's added. Okay, so as new processes present themselves, digital skills and talents are added. And you'll want to revise your org structure to support these. You're also going to want to put expectations in place to support these. So in other words, quotas or budgets assigned to the street, maybe some internal quotas. So you've got a certain expectation amongst each department to hit benchmarks. Here we have a typical model from when revenue reaches 5 to 10% of total revenue for the cluster or station. Okay, you can see the ops department, the operations department added a digital tech. Again, you have the programming department, which remains somewhat integrated, but you've added an integrated planner under marketing and promotions. And then under the sales department, you've got integrated sellers that you can see. So it's becoming a bit more integrated. The sales manager roles begin to consolidate. So the staff is now being judged on traditional or typical ad sales and digital. So those quotas that were assigned to the street, they're being measured, they're being inspected. Remember, we've said this on prior webinars, what's inspected gets respected. So if you're consistently checking in with your team and making sure that they're achieving those benchmarks, they're more likely to pay attention to them and hit them. And finally, what we have is what I call the dream, okay? Digital is no longer a bolt-on. In fact, it's a way of life at the station. You can kind of see here, the sales manager's business approach is separated into direct versus agency teams. You've got the sales talent might be separated, maybe not, but maybe into 2 different teams, whether that's an agency direct team and maybe a digital team, or maybe a direct and the direct sellers are selling digital, but the agency team isn't. There's different ways to structure that, but again, you kind of have 2 separate teams with 2 different goals there. And then you've got programming taking on both audio and digital content oversight. So again, it's about changing the org structure to support the behavior that you want to instill. So in other words, that dream, that digital, again, is no longer a bolt-on, but it's a way of life at the station. That brings us to Q&A.
All right, guys, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. That was very informative. Of course, I've got some questions. So the first one I'm going to throw at you, Mark. How do these guidelines apply differently to small single market groups versus larger ones?
Yeah, the very, very good question, and probably the number one that I hear as I go around the country with our partner clients and such. I would say that what it comes down to is there's a possibility that in a smaller organization with obviously smaller employment budgets and such, that some of those various digital positions that we discussed earlier might have to be combined. I mentioned while we were going through some of them that the strategist and coordinator could be the same. What I would like to see as a minimum, if it's at all possible, is that type of position, and you can just call it the strategist, they can handle the client side of the business as well, particularly at the beginning when there isn't a ton of campaigns running. I think it's important that a market, at the very least, station perhaps, but again, depending on the size, have that position in place, because they become the real baseline help for the sales staff and the clients. So it's sort of a combination job. When I first had that position in one of my previous companies, I called it a digital concierge, because that's exactly what they were. They were the person about digital, period. And it provided the sales staff with the help that they needed, but it also provided the client with a go-to for whether it was questions or wanted to change something on the campaign or what have you. So I think basically we need to look at these positions as growth elements along the way, and it will probably have to combine some expertise together in smaller organizations that larger ones may be able to take on as separate entities.
Great, thank you so much. All right, Todd, I've got one for you.
Okay.
How do you budget when you've never sold digital before?
So the old budget question, the expectation question, and I just brought that up, saying that you've got to put expectations in the field if you expect your people to actually do what you want them to do. So how do you do it? Well, the first thing that we do is we kind of have an alignment call with our stations once they commit to doing a digital transformation. We kind of say, okay, what is your total overall revenue? What percentage of that would you like to do digitally? Or what percentage of that overall revenue would you consider yourself successful? When do we throw the proverbial party? When we hit X amount of revenue? Maybe it's 6% the first year. Maybe it's 8% the first year. Kind of the gold standard is trying to hit that 10%. But that might be done over a year or two. But we work with the station management to figure out what should that goal be. And then from there, it's imperative to spread that expectation amongst the sellers in the field. Now, let's just hypothetically say the number for the first month of digital is going to be, just for round numbers, $10,000, and you've got 5 reps on your staff. The easiest way to do it is just give each rep $2,000 budget, and there you go, it's 10 grand. But that's the exact wrong way to do it, because you may have a new seller on your team, and you may have somebody that's been on your team for 15 years that has a giant list. The person with the giant list has the best opportunity to help hit that overall revenue number, whereas the new person without a list probably is going to have the most difficult time hitting even a small number. So you got to spread it based on where you think the expectation should lie, and taking a look at each individual person's list. I think you can do it a little bit more strategically. But again, we take you through that process. And it is not the easiest process, but it's a very, very interesting process where you learn a lot about your business.
Thank you. That's really insightful. And I'm kind of going to take that a little step further with you, Todd, again. Mm-hmm. So have you seen success with groups who don't assign quotas to the reps?
Well, that's an interesting question. I've always said, if you have no expectations or low expectations, this one's not even low. This is no expectations. I guarantee you, your team will hit them. If you have no expectations, your team will hit them. The fact of the matter is this: I have seen groups, like I've talked to groups that have said, "Oh, we're successful with digital," and then it comes up, "Well, how do you assign the quotas to the field?" We don't, but they're happy with their digital revenue. I'm going to say that best practices show that when you assign quotas, they're generally met. The ones that have loose quotas or no quotas you're basically saying we have no expectations. And when there's no expectations, your reps will probably sell it when they can, maybe not push it, maybe they're not being leaned on. And I've seen like maybe a success story here and there, but what I consider a success, it depends. If I think that there's more revenue available in the field that isn't being touched because you have one rep out of 5 or one rep out of 7 that's actually doing digital, no, I don't consider a success, but the station may. It just depends. But I'm going to tell you, we've been able to drive revenue by training, by putting proper expectations in place, and by having management buy in and say, yes, this is what we're going to do, and actually manage towards changing the behavior that digital along with audio, digital along with radio is ultimately more successful for the client, gets better results, and therefore more renewals. And therefore, why wouldn't I sell digital? It's that type of thinking that makes it successful.
Oh, that makes so much sense. Thank you, Todd. I'm going to turn it back around to kind of focusing on, the growth and positions. And so, Mark, I'm going to throw this at you. If you're given personnel constraints, where do you start with some of these digital positions? I know you touched on it a little bit, but could you expound on that a little further?
Yeah, again, I'll say if we're talking about digital becoming a part and parcel of everything we do at the station, even as was mentioned in the personnel list, marketing is increasingly using digital assets to promote their own station, whether it's social feeds or advertising during your rating periods online, what have you. So if we're thinking about the organization as a whole, I think we need to look at where the best use of these new positions would be for the station as a whole. So it might be somebody with more digital chops coming into what is now known as the promotions and or marketing department to help them. But if we're talking about revenue generation, I'll go back to what I mentioned before. I think and I love the term because it is meaningful when you say digital strategist. So it helps the salespeople focus on using digital strategy for their clients. It isn't about new shiny objects. I've got this new product, or again now connected TV is the big thing these days, streaming television. But is that right for everybody? Geofencing a couple of years ago was the new shiny object, and people wanted to put it on every campaign. Doesn't necessarily mean that it should be. Not every tactic is for every campaign. So I think it's important that we have somebody that can help focus sales and our clients on what works for a given campaign. So the strategist to me is probably the most important from the sales side, because there are times the client doesn't know much more than we do going in, because they're so confused about the plethora of options that are now available to them, and they think that putting a post on their Facebook feed is doing digital marketing. So the strategist's ability to show them the way, show them the light, so to speak, I think it's important. From there, other support for sales and the execution of the campaigns then follows. The things like campaign coordinators, those that can do the reports, even some folks that can tickle the keys and do code to help clients and or create the spots or the ads that we run digitally. So, you want to prioritize from your own perspective what you have in-house, who can step in from jump, or what needs to be brought in.
Great, thank you. That makes a lot of sense, and really does help kind of lay out how to tackle going about those positions. And so I'm going to ask one final question, and Todd, I'm going to spin this back to you. A bit of an open-ended question here, but what would you lay out as a timeline to begin this whole process?
Yeah, so the first step, and I'm hoping that a lot of people on this call have seen a demo. We did a call where we did some demos, and if you haven't seen a demo, definitely contact us and we'll show it to you. That's the first step. And after you see the demo and you're like, yes, I'm buying in, I'm going to make a digital transformation, we will get you signed up. We'll get you signed up with Next. And the first step is really to, like I said earlier, it's aligning expectations. It's really to find out what the station's expectations are and to answer questions like, how do we budget and what number should we shoot for, and kind of come up with a joint plan. And we do that with you through a short series of calls. And once we've accomplished that, it's all about training, and it's all about getting your people enabled to get on the street and to speak intelligently on digital. I would say that if a group were to start today or within the next even couple of weeks, they'd definitely be in a great place to put quotas in the field and start attaining them for early 2021. Call it January of 2021. But it's a fast process to get started. The training does take a little bit of time, but I think it's time well spent. It's an investment. And the fact that we offer that, and the fact that we offer hands-on, training and lessons through our Marketron Learning Center, it's an excellent way to learn the materials. And again, I think it can be done in a speedy fashion to get people ready for 2021, and perhaps even to get some dollars flowing into Q4.
All right, thank you. Todd and Mark, I really appreciate your time today. I do want to let anyone on the line know that if your question wasn't answered, we are going to have someone reach out to you soon. So don't worry, your question will be answered and followed up with you directly. We will be sending out an email soon that will have a link to watch the full recording of our webinar today, as well as a download of the presentation and a link to register for our next webinar on October 7th. Launching your digital game plan. Again, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Todd. And
Sure.
We appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Christine. Thank you, everybody, for attending.